Okay, now since we have practiced our polynomial division, we are going to go ahead and try some more advanced examples. So notice in this question we've given a more standard view of the division question, and something specific I'm hoping that we're seeing here is that we're starting off with an x to the fourth term, and then we have an x cubed, and then we just have an x and a constant. So notice here that we're missing the x squared term. We're missing the x squared term, missing x squared. So what do I recommend? Replace with 0x squareds. Replace with 0x squareds. And when I say 0x squared, I mean 0 is the coefficient of x squared, because whenever I have 0 times anything, I always really just have 0. But this is just going to be a placeholder, just a placeholder. And you're going to see this often, that we're going to be having terms that are missing in descending order. And remember, we always want to write our polynomials in descending order. That's sort of a given now in nature. So in our transformation from this more general format of division into our long division format, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add that missing term. So I'm going to have x plus 3 divided into, I'm going to have 2x to the fourth, then I'm going to have 7x cubed, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 0x squared. I'm going to add 0x squared, so every term is placed in descending order. Then I have plus x, and then I have a minus 12. So now since I've done this, I can go ahead and write this in descending order. I mean, I can go ahead and solve my division question using the process we've learned so far. So we're going to say to ourselves, what times x gives you 2x to the fourth? That's going to be a value of 2x cubed. And we're going to take that 2x cubed and we're going to multiply it. We're going to multiply it, and I'll do that in green, times x plus 3. So that's going to give us 2x to the fourth. 2x cubed times 3 gives me a value of 6x cubed. So I'm going to have plus 6x cubed. And I'm going to remember that I need to always change my signs because I'm subtracting. So this becomes negative, and this becomes negative as well, because I always change my signs when I subtract. So 2x to the fourth minus 2x to the fourth gives you 0 here, so we get a 0. 7x cubed minus 6x cubed just gives me a value of 1x cubed. 1x cubed, and then I'm going to bring down my 0x squared. I know that seems a little funny to bring down 0x squared, but it really makes this process a lot easier. So now we're going to start from the beginning. I'll do it in another color, different iteration. So we're going to say what times x gives you x cubed. So hopefully you recognize that's a positive x squared, a positive x squared. And we're going to start that same process over. We're going to say x squared times x gives me x cubed. That's a good check. And then x squared times 3 gives me a positive 3x squared. And remember, what do we have to do with our signs every time? Subtract them. So this becomes a negative and this becomes a negative. So now we will recognize that we're going to have x cubed minus x cubed. That gives me 0. 0x squared minus 3x squared gives me a value of negative 3x squared. Negative 3x squared. And we will bring down this positive x. We'll bring down this positive x. So we're working through this just like a regular long division question. Starting from the beginning. What times x gives me negative 3x squared? That's going to be a value of negative 3x. We're going to multiply again by our entire divisor. So we're going to have negative 3x squared, and then negative 3x times positive 3 gives me a value of negative 9x. Negative 3x squared, and then a negative 9x. But remember, we always have to subtract that value, so our signs will change. So a negative becomes a positive, and a negative becomes a positive. So this becomes 0, and then we're going to have, what color did I use? I used gray. Then we're going to, we used orange. So then we're going to have negative 3x plus 3x squared gives me 0. X plus 9x gives me a value of 10x. 10x. And then lastly, we'll go ahead in pink, and we'll bring down that, actually no, I did it in orange, so I'll be consistent. We'll bring down that negative 12 here. Start from the beginning. We'll do that in pink. What times x gives you 10x? That's going to be a value of positive 10. That's going to be a value of positive 10. We're going to multiply this positive 10 through by my entire divisor. So I'm going to have positive 10x, and then 10 times 3 gives me a value of positive 30. Remember, what do we always have to do? We have to change our sign. So this becomes a negative, and this becomes a negative. 10x minus 10x gives you 0. Negative 12 minus 30 gives you, we'll say this gives you a value of negative 42. Negative 42. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is my remainder. I can't spell remainder. Remainder. Yes. So spell check on my cell phone has killed my ability to spell. So how do we write our solution? Be very careful. When you write your solution, we're going to write all that stuff we got up on top. So that's going to be 2x cubed plus x squared minus 3x plus 10. But we're going to include our remainder, and we're going to have to, and that's a plus 10 at the end. But our remainder has a negative sign, so we're going to subtract 42 all over our divisor, which was a value of x plus 3. 42 all over x plus 3. So this was a little bit more of a long out drawn question. However, we did have to replace that value of 0x squared. It makes this much easier to understand. So now let us go ahead and continue with our next example. So here we're missing a couple terms. So I'm going to make a little star here. We are missing, what are we missing? We're missing our x squared term. We're missing our x term in the numerator. So we go from x cubed all the way to our constant. So when we write this, we're going to rewrite this as x minus 2 divided into x cubed, but I'm going to replace that 0x squared I'm going to replace that x squared with a coefficient of 0. I'm going to add in a factor of x, a term x, by giving it a coefficient of 0. And then I have at the very end my minus 8. So I haven't changed the problem, I just changed the way it looked. So now we're going to start with our iteration. We're going to say what times x gives me x cubed? That's going to be a value of x squared. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to multiply our x squared times our entire divisor, and that's going to give me an x cubed minus 2x squared. X cubed minus 2x squared. Remember what I have to do in my sign? I have to negate this, and I have to negate this, which makes it positive. So notice here, that's going to give me x cubed minus x cubed, which is the value of 0. 0x squared plus 2x squared is going to be a value of positive 2x squared. And then I'm going to bring down my value of 0x. We're going to bring down our value of positive 0x. And again, 0x is still a value of 0, but this just gives me an idea for placeholding. So we're going to start with iterations again. What times x gives me 2x squared? That's going to be a value of positive 2x. We're going to repeat the process. 2x times x gives me 2x squared. 2x times negative 2 gives me a value of negative 4x. But what do I always have to do in my signs? I'm going to use a different color because orange and yellow, they clash. So this gives you a negative 2x squared, and this is going to give me a positive 4x. When we negate, we have to subtract, so everything changes signs. So notice here, we are going to have 2x squared minus 2x squared gives me 0. 0x plus 4x gives me a value of positive 4x. And then we're going to go ahead and bring down our negative 8. Starting our iterations over, we're going to say what times x gives you 4x, and that's going to be a value of positive 4. Multiplying the 4 by the entire divisor, we're going to get 4x. 4 times negative 2 gives me a value of negative 8. But remember, what do I have to do with this? I have to change my sign, so this becomes a negative, and this becomes a positive. 4x minus 4x gives us 0. Negative 8 plus 8 gives us 0. So our remainder here is 0. Our remainder here is 0. And that's a interesting fact, because what does that mean? So what is the meaning of this? So that means that we will actually have a nice polynomial being our quotient, x squared plus 2x plus 4. So we could say that this division question, this guy right here, equals x squared plus 2x plus 4. But more specifically, we know that x minus 2 is a factor of x cubed minus 8, and x equals, and therefore, we'll say, and therefore, x equals to 2 is a 0. X equals to 2 is a 0 because remember, if we said x minus 2 equal to 0, we add 2 on both sides and we get x equals to 2. So therefore we know that x equals to 2 is a 0, and that is very important to us.